I think we're all going to learn. I'm going to learn a lot. You may already know all of this. So I just, a couple housekeeping things. You already know about this. If you have questions, you can submit them using the QR code. So feel free to do that. And then we're just going to jump right in and get started. I think I want to start broadly with kind of a general question, and you can see where your expertise fits in, because this one's an interesting one about how energy, and Jarrod and I said this to you earlier, there's the traditional concept of energy sources that we're all so familiar with. And then there's so much that's now evolving and changing, things that Summer you're involved with, and Nicole, what you're trying to prepare companies for, your company for, the world for. And so how those shifting things shift power dynamics, both domestically and what we're putting out into the world and how we're preparing ourselves, but also too how it changes the dynamics globally as well. Jarrod, I can start with you.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And what I often say is energy now is cool. Energy is the coolest thing on the planet because energy is essential to all of the great tech developments that are happening when it comes to AI. And so the most advanced thing that we're all involved in is how to literally power artificial intelligence, and how do we win that artificial intelligence race. And so the coolest companies out there are companies that are merging energy with AI, and that is now becoming a huge global tool that the president is leveraging in diplomacy all over the world. And so just to kind of quickly hit it, I mean, the president was able to achieve this historic peace deal in the Middle East. He issued Russian sanctions to try to bring another war to a close just a couple days ago. He's on a trip tonight over to Asia. A central piece of all of this is energy. And so, I mean, the sanctions are on Russian oil. The ability to go and bomb Iran and not have our oil prices spike here in the U.S. because we're producing enough oil here in the U.S. that oil didn't shoot up to $150 a barrel like some people predicted. And now being able to leverage LNG and AI infrastructure and access to nuclear, all of that is a huge piece of energy diplomacy, and the president is wielding that, and he's having historic events. And so there is nothing more important or cooler to be involved in right now than energy.
Okay, we'll take that away then. Summer, what about for you? And in terms of digital currency, what kind of role is that playing?
Well, as far as digital currencies and kind of the global economy, I think a lot of this we're focused on stablecoins right now. And the reason that is so important, the reason we're focused on it is because 99% of stablecoins are backed by US dollar denominations. The stablecoin issuers right now rank about 17th in global holdings of US treasuries. So there really is kind of a global impact on having the US dollar be the dominant backing for these stable coins, which really give emerging markets access to US dollars through the stablecoin, the stablecoin network. So it's something that we think it's really important for the U.S. to capitalize on. We want to make sure that U.S. dollar remains the dominant backing. We had the president sign the Genius Act into law a few months ago, and that really provided the clarity we needed to make sure that stablecoins continue to be issued with that U.S. dollar backing to make sure that the dollar is the dominant the dominant backing for these tokens that are going to be really important in the global economy and emerging markets.
Yeah, it is interesting to hear you have the U.S. backing, but then you're talking about some of these countries that haven't had a way in to participating in a lot of ways, that this could be a way in for them and a new pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. This gives a lot of individuals and emerging companies, emerging economies access to the U.S. dollar for the first time, and they can hold stable coins and move the money instantly around the globe. So it really is new access to the global financial system for a lot of emerging markets.
Nicole, how do you think about all of this?
Sure. I think we should just start from the beginning when you think about technology and how energy energy and technology are very much interdependent and intertwined. We know that any advancement in technology has in large part been dependent on energy historically, and that is why we are absolutely committed to energy efficiency globally. I also think that you're seeing quite a trend with various countries revisiting their energy policies, particularly with respect to the EU and their simplification effort, both with the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Initiative, CSRD and CSDDD, because as Jarrod noted, energy is going to really be the underpinning for AI interdependence and deployment and development. And so from that standpoint, we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're staying ahead of it and leveraging this in a way that drives transformation for all. And at our core, that is what we do. We power an inclusive future for all, and we do that through our hardware, our software, and we're leveraging access to this technology to ensure that everyone globally can have greater connectivity to resources like healthcare and education and financial capability resources. And energy is a critical component of that.
And I think right now, so many of us are hearing data centers, data centers, data centers. I mean, that is just so in the pipeline right now, and it is driving so much. From your perspective, what's the importance of keeping those in the U.S. and balancing kind of the pros and cons of that and them being built and us relying on them outside of the U.S.?
Well, again, we should start with those critical components for AI. And we know that AI needs infrastructure, connectivity, data, and security. And fortunately, Cisco works at every layer of that stack. When we think about data centers and the extent to which they need to be positioned here and or elsewhere, we support countries having choice and control over what their respective positions need to be, as long as it's not compromising connectivity. And what's helpful is Cisco can operate both on-prem and in the cloud. So we work to service our partners and our allies wherever they may be, and we absolutely are committed to the global interdependency of this, because we know that to the extent that that's compromised, it leads to greater fragmentation and can actually impact our global order.
Yeah. Jarrod, I'm curious what you think about that, just from the administration's perspective and also more specifically the work you all are doing as well.
Yeah. Well, we want them here, but what we need to do is really fix our grid. And so when we talk about the grid, the president declared an energy emergency early on in the administration, but what we really have is an electricity emergency, and that's with the demand that is on the grid right now. Now, the grid is not one national one; it's spread out into different regions, and different regions have different problems. But what we're focused on is what the president really wants is a optimized and stabilized and growing grid that can to work with the data centers and basically set up so that we could generate the power we need to fulfill the data centers and the AI, but not pull from the consumer. What we don't want is energy prices raising. And the president is on us every day about gas prices and energy prices, and he wants those down. And so if we are going to build data centers, which is what we want to do, how do we set it up with the grid so that it's not pulling and driving up the energy prices? And there's ways we can do that. And so what we're doing now at the White House is literally getting all of those people. There's kind of this growing consortium building of people from the tech sector, governors, people from the energy sector, manufacturers, all coming together and saying, okay, how are we going to be the leader on AI, but have the data centers here? But how do we set it up so that the consumer's prices aren't going up?
How do you do that?
Well, there's some ways. I mean, you can co-locate things behind the meter, and so also where access to natural gas is. And so, like, we had this giant event up in Pennsylvania that the president pulled all this kind of group together, and a lot of big companies came in and announced partnerships they were doing, so they can pull the natural gas that's in the Marcellus, power the data centers, and then that excess power goes into the grid and can help the community. And so we're trying to look at the best practices of where that happens. And you've got pockets like in Pennsylvania or in Texas or in Alaska where you can do that based on where the captured gas is, and you can easily access it to power the grid. Now, how do we do that across the whole nation is we're trying to pull those best practices together.
Summer, that energy emergency, as you said, how does that affect your world?
Well, we have a lot of validators that are critical to a open blockchain system that do need a lot of energy. The mining for proof of work state underlying the blockchain, it does take some energy, and there's been some focus on that. But I think the focus has shifted a little bit because what they've realized is there's an opportunity to actually help some of the power load and maybe be having those the mining activities occur in off-peak hours, especially when you're looking at renewable energy where, it's going to come, wind's going to blow all the time and you can't store that energy. You could have a mining center that is using that energy real time. So it helps balance out energy load onto the grid. So there is definitely a piece to the blockchain that is very dependent on energy sources and having that readily available to continue validating these blockchains to make them work the way they're supposed to.
Yeah. And Nicole, as I'm listening to them talk about this, I mean, obviously you all have been involved in connectivity and software and hardware for many, many years. But this really does seem like we're going into a brand new frontier in a way of what we're creating and what's going to drive the economies and as you're saying, drive a lot of diplomacy as well, and using it as a bargaining chip and leverage. So help people understand how this moment is different than what we've seen in the previous years before.
I think it's different in some respects, but also similar in others, right? So different because 3 days ago, the president updated the AI action plan and released additional information with respect to the AI export initiative. And he's indicated that this is a top priority, identifying additional ways in which we can increase export financing for companies and organizations that are seeking to drive AI application and technology globally. And on the one hand, you have that coupled with export controls. And there really is, there needs to be a balance of interests and a balance by which you have companies that are able to increase access to innovation and increase access to this technology, in addition to governments that are developing the requisite policies to contend with these technologies, as well as with the private sector that is absolutely standing ready to support the development of this. You have countries that are, as you mentioned, developing these technologies within their country, within their sovereign nations. And because of that, given the challenges that we're seeing, we know that countries have to continue to invest in their infrastructure while balancing their interests globally. And that's where this is different and similar. How do you create a world that is globally interdependent while ensuring that you are managing your security and sovereign challenges at home? And that is really at the heart of this debate. I think too many countries right now are hyper-focused on moving their devices, moving their technology, both on-prem, and it can be at a sacrifice. And as we heard the director talk about security, we know that security in many respects is able to be delivered effectively and at scale when it's in the cloud, as opposed to on-prem. And so you have to ensure that you are absolutely balancing these respective interests across the board and that countries are positioned effectively to drive that forward in tandem with each other. And I think that's what can potentially be lost at this moment if we're not careful.
Yeah, that seems to really get at the heart of this. And Jarrod, again, just going back to you, and I know you're talking with the president, you all are thinking about this. How do you balance what she's talking about? Like making sure domestically that you're in a great position, but also the interdependence around the globe.
Yeah.
How do you balance
It's great. And it's such an interesting time because that same consortium I talked about that's happening domestically around AI, it's actually happening globally as well, because one of the big things that's hot off the presses is, we're trying to get the world off of Russian energy sources. And so the only way, or the way we're going to be able to do that is increase production here in the US. So it's kind of a twofold, two-sided coin. We have to get rid of the long permitting and streamline regulation, get funding where it needs to be so that we can build the export facilities make have the production capable so that we can ship LNG, for example, over into Europe. Europe now has been reliant on Russia for LNG and for gas and for oil. Now they've made commitments even this week of saying we're not going to take that anymore. They've put out real strict deadlines that they want to achieve, where they want to be off Russian gas by the end of 2027. At the same time, you've got historic trade deals that were signed just a couple months ago, where Europe has to buy $750 billion of U.S. energy. And so all these things are converging at the same time. And so what we're doing every day, I mean, we're literally, Secretary Burgum's going to meet with a bunch of ambassadors next week, and then Secretary Wright and Secretary Burgum are going over to Europe again in a couple weeks. And it's really working with the EU, working with the member states of how do we partner? We have the capacity here. Do you have the infrastructure in your state to reverse the flow so it's not flowing from Russia through Europe? Can we use that critical infrastructure? Where does it need to be improved? And then how do we build the correct shipping, transmission, intake in Europe to get everybody off of Russian gas to bring an end to this war, but then also long term, have that beneficial to U.S. Facilities as well.
Yeah. Summer, what do you think about that? I'm curious from your perspective what you think about that as well.
Well, as far as, kind of energy independence, obviously that's something that, I think all sectors, see as a benefit. And certainly, for our industry, a lot of the innovation, it's important to have that access and be able to power the technology behind the innovation. But the other interesting thing here is when you think about global markets and some of these emerging markets being able to access, buying energy and being part of the global trade, really we kind of look at stable coins as that entry into this access for some of these countries that have, maybe that's a government issue, corrupt banking issue. They're able to have US dollar backed stable coins where they can start to participate more in global trade and probably accessing some of the energy sources that are available to them. So it is an interesting time for some of these emerging markets and how they get their energy and how they participate in global trade.
Yeah. Nicole, last question, then we're going to go to the audience questions. But just as we kind of come to an end of our discussion here, what's the most valuable commodity going to be going forward?
Look, I think we are at a true inflection point, and without being the determining voice in the room on what the most valuable commodity will be, I will say this inflection point right now with respect to AI and access to AI technologies, applications, will be so transformative for billions of individuals. We know that right now 2.7 billion people are disconnected. And that means they do not have access to requisite resources for healthcare and education and financial capability. And that means they can be more left behind if we continue to deploy and develop these technologies in a way that doesn't include them. So when I think about the most valuable commodity, I think about ways in which we are bringing individuals who have been disconnected into the fold and creating a world that will transform the day-to-day lives for everyone in a positive way. That for me is value, and that for us at Cisco is value. How do we change the day-to-day lives for everyone around the world in a way in which they're connected to more resources, more access, more education, and more healthcare?
Yeah. Summer, what about you?
So I would say innovation is probably going to be, an important global commodity. And, one of the things that we are doing at Blockchain Association is working closely with policymakers to ensure that we have the clarity going forward so that innovators can stay in the U.S., build in the U.S., and we are not handing that, that innovation, those creators off to another country because we do not have clear rules of the road here. So that's really important because I think there's a lot of interesting innovation that's going to come out of the blockchain space. And it's important that that commodity stays here in the U.S. and is, and it becomes a global commodity at that point. So it is, important for the U.S. Economy to keep the innovation here and, keep the U.S. dollar as the dominant backing of some of the stable coins and really just keep the U.S. as the dominant player here in innovation going forward.
Yeah. And Jarrod?
Well, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say U.S. LNG. It's the hottest commodity. We got it in abundance. Everybody wants it. We need to get it flowing throughout the U.S. We need to get it shipped over to Asia and Europe. But I mean, ultimately, intelligence will be. But I'd say if you ask me right now, U.S. LNG, hottest commodity in the world.
Okay. We can take an audience question if you want to give it to us.
Yes, we have one question from the audience. How should leaders future-proof their asset strategies to ensure long-term global stability rather than short-term leverage?
Interesting question. Jarrod, I'll go back to you and we can go down the line.
Well, I would say, I mean, stability is the thing we hear the most from the energy industry. They want to know that we have permitting reform, that a lot of the changes that we've already instituted from the executive side get codified in legislature. And so that's the issue we hear the most is we just want certainty that we can streamline permitting, that we can invest in the U.S. and that all of the great things that President Trump has already done are going to be codified by the legislature.
Summer?
One of the things I like to talk about when we were talking about stable coins and digital currencies is this idea that it does provide stability in some of these areas where there's a lot of instability, political instability, economic instability. And so, the idea is having another way to access global financial markets that is not influenced by governments, by politics, I think brings a lot of stability to the system generally.
And Nicole?
I think greater access to information and to partners who can help to transform your goals and objectives into reality. And that is how we future-proof any challenges that exist today. It's making sure that you are armed with the requisite allies and partners to drive your goals forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think the takeaway too from all of this is it is going to force a real coming together of everyone to figure all of this out and move forward and at the same time balancing that with what's good for each country individually with what works globally.
That's great.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do not sense the pushback that you might have normally sensed globally. And I think it's because you're seeing progress, obviously with the Middle East, but you're seeing progress now with, real sanctions on Russia. And I think globally people want that to come to an end. And so ultimately those are driving forces. Those political issues are driving forces that affect everything, but they're really affecting the energy industry right now.
All right. Thank you to all of you. You guys were excellent. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for listening and being here. And thanks so much for your time.